Hello, my junk journaling friends. Welcome back to my channel. I'm Amanda, and I'm actually making the pages for my large junk journal. If you are following along, this is part 6 of how to make a large junk journal. Here I'm just showing you all the papers that I'm going to be using in my journal. I've got lots of great things here in envelopes and, of course, tea-dyed paper, my favorites. The first step that I'm doing is remeasuring my journal, making sure I know the measurements and I write it down so I don't forget. I usually like to keep like an eighth of an inch or two around the cover. But it's a junk journal, so if you want it to stick out, feel free to make the pages larger than the journal cover. Here is a piece of sketchbook paper, and I ripped it out of the notebook, so it's got all those nice little tabs, and I love that texture. And of course, this page is going to have one side, the large page that fills the journal, and the other side is just going to be a half sheet. And so that's one of the ways you can fill a large journal. You can either extend it with a different piece of paper, another piece of paper, or you can just leave it a half. And it builds interest and texture by having different sized pages. So this one is going to be a half and a whole sheet. And I'm going to bind it into the cover where it's folded. Okay, I'm setting the pages that I'm going to sew aside, and then if I come to a small little plastic envelope, I just fold it. Now this, I love having office supplies in this envelope. This manila envelope is very fun to work with and fun to have in your journal. Folding it mostly in half. There it is, in half. And then I decide to go ahead and make it a pocket right away. Sometimes I sew it into the signature, into the cover, and then I make it a pocket. You can easily just trim the end of it, but I had a fun little pocket idea in mind. So I go ahead and trim the end off so it opens, and then I get a circle punch, and I just punch half of the circle, and I try to get it centered, and then it's easier to fill as a pocket, and it's cute. I like that little half circle for a pocket. Okay, and I always have music paper, and this is vintage music paper, and I love the color of this music paper. And so I'm just gonna measure it against the other paper that I've already cut and measured. It's sometimes easier to do it that way. And I'm trying to get it centered with the music on the paper, but you know, when you're doing this, you can do it however you want. You can from the top or the bottom. It doesn't have to be centered. And of course, again, it's a junk journal. You can have it all sticking out. It's up to you what you like. There is no wrong way to fill a journal. It's up to you. But this is how I'm filling this journal, and probably how I fill most of my journals. This is kind of my style, my way of doing it. So I keep I keep rubbing the center of the paper because I'm just trying to make sure in my mind whether it needs to be reinforced. So this is vintage paper. It's been folded for a long time. So I decide to reinforce it with a piece of the wallpaper that I used on the inside cover. Normally when I do smaller journals and I'm just taking a half sheet of that vintage music paper and I put it in half, I do not reinforce it. But since it's I'm putting it in my journal on the actual place it's been bent in half, I feel like it needs a little more support. And I really like the way this yellow on yellow the way it looks, sorry. I'm very pleased with this sheet of paper right now. And here is just a Dollar Tree doily. Dollar Tree products are great. It's fun to add into your journal. I like the old and the new, and I want this doily to fit perfectly, so I end up cutting off a little bit of the rounded edge. And then, oh gosh, I just love this tracing paper. I love the texture. And then I'm just kind of deciding how I want to fold it and put it in. I think I want it the whole sheet, and it does fit. And I like, you know, the texture of having things ripped. So I end up ripping this one instead of cutting it. And I love the way these two pieces of paper look together. The clear white and the yellow vintage music paper. It's a cute combination, I think. Makes me happy. And the smaller your edges get, the more difficult in general it is to rip. And so this doesn't rip perfectly, but I like it. I like that jagged edge. So I'm still very happy with how this turned out. And I just to be sure, I always keep putting the paper back on the cover of the journal to make sure I'm just keeping things straight, keeping it the right size, making sure it fits. This is a great children's page. It's so colorful. I love the illustrations, and it fits pretty well. I'm just trimming off just a little bit on the top and bottom, and maybe the side. So this one, of course, I had to rip out because it was glue bound. So I ripped out each side, and then I'm going to put them together somehow. But I know I need to trim off a little bit of the edges, so I do that now. But I'm going to do whatever sewing or attaching later. Same with this set of paper. And obviously it's too tall. So most of this video is just basically me measuring and cutting. And that's all you need to do for your large journal. Just find large books and then just measure the pages and cut them to fit. Or there's a dictionary paper that's going to be very small and just a little extra kind of embellishment in a journal. And this is a fabulous large book page that I love, and I'm folding it so that the writing is going to be like a flap, and then the letter will be seen on the outside. So it's going to be kind of an interactive element. With that. And then the large map took me a little bit to figure out how I was going to use it in the journal. I decided to make interactive flaps and make it into a pocket, and it's not going to be on the actual folded edge, so I don't think I need to reinforce it at all. Just making sure I fold it up enough so it's not hanging out of the book. I just love working with paper. I love all the different textures, and I'm definitely in my happy place right now making this video. This is that packing craft paper. I decided to put more of that in this journal than I've ever done before in other journals. And I'm using my metal cork-backed ruler to rip the pages, and I use it upside down because the cork is a little smaller than the metal, and so it's easier to rip on the edge of the metal than have it the other way. There's too much movement there with the cork, if that makes sense. Here's another great children's book page. And there's a lot on this page, so I do end up taking some off and leaving it at the fold that it was originally in the book. So cover your eyes if this makes you sad, because it makes me a little sad, but I like the way it turned out. I like the ripped edges. Normally I try to, if it's a vintage book page, I try to keep the whole page and either fold it or make a flap or a pocket, but this one I just ripped. There's a teeny tiny bit over, and I am being very fussy by ripping it. That's okay. I'll do me, you do you. And of course it's so small, it's very difficult to rip. But I'm determined to have all the sides ripped. And I love it. There you go. And then here is the cardstock, the scrapbooking paper cardstock. And it's gorgeous and it's thick. And with the scrapbooking paper cardstock, I decided just to have one side long and one side short. I might change my mind before the book is done and either like sew something on to extend it, sew another piece of scrapbooking paper to make a pocket, or I've even thought of like cutting some of the handkerchiefs down and sewing it on the small edge. We'll see. So I've gathered all of the folded papers that I'm going to use in my signatures, and I'm kind of putting them together in signatures how I think they're gonna look cute. So I'm not finished making all my pages, but I'm kind of just trying it out a little bit to see how much more I need and how it looks together. Basically, I'm just jumping the gun here because it's kind of my favorite part is putting together the signatures. I love the different papers sitting together. It's my favorite part about junk journaling. And of course, that's why I kept it in this video, because it is. And I can't explain to you what actually I'm doing. I'm just putting them together. It's not like it's not a thinking thing. It's just a feeling thing. At least for me. So then I'm left with the pages I need to sew or tape and here I have the small book pages that are really thick and beautiful, and they have a vintage feel to them. And this is the first time I've tried to attach them with glue first before I sew them, and I really liked how that worked out. A lot of times when I'm sewing pages, things shift, and this time I thought, well, why don't I just put a little bit of glue, and I'm using Scotch Create glue stick. It's permanent, photo safe, multi-purpose, and I really like the way it worked. And so I'm taking a bunch of these small book pages and sewing 2 together, and then I sew 4 together, and I'm just deciding, you know, if they look good upside down, sideways, whatever, and then I put them together quick and easy, and then sew them. And I believe I'm using a zigzag stitch for these guys. Yeah. And I chose the light blue. I'm using the same colors that I used on the cover. Kind of a darker blue and then a lighter blue. For all of the pages. But for these particular book pages, I went with that light sky blue. So I sew the pages together. Of course, I'm measuring thinking about how I'm gonna fold them, and then I fold them. Just coming up. Look at that giant piece of Frankenstein paper. I love it. Look at that. Look how big it is. Oh, and I wish you could feel the thick paper texture. It's amazing. Okay, so now I'm folding it over, and I'm trying to decide, of course, how big I want it. And I love those big ripped edges. So now I am getting the heavy cardstock craft paper together. I have 2 sheets of it, and I have to connect it somehow. And this time I decided to use more of that yellow wallpaper. And since the glue stick works so well, I'm gluing it to the paper first before I sew it. And this was kind of difficult because when you do this, you need to, decide how large you want the extended part to be. So I wanted most of the craft paper to stick out and not have a large spine, but I'm using a big piece of wallpaper, So I'm kind of like measuring how much of that I want to show. And you can use a big piece, but then you would have to either fold or cut off the excess craft paper. Now I am connecting the copy paper that has been tea dyed. I'm doing the same method I've done this whole video, where I apply a little glue stick, flatten them out, and then sew them together. I'm probably going to do that from here on out. I haven't run it, unless I run into any problems. I haven't run into any problems so far, but I really like that method. I just wanted to point out, if you make Frankenstein paper like I do, and you rip it or tear it through your sewing, you'll need to cut it because it's sewed together. So just don't be surprised when you rip it or tear it, if you haven't thought about this. I'm sure you have, but when I first did it, I was like, ugh, every time. But yeah, I just tear each side and then come in with my scissors and a quick snip. But yeah, think about that so you don't wrench on it and then, you know, you're sewing, all the threads will tighten up your paper. Now here, I've decided to go ahead and use fabric for a little miniature spine on these two sheets of paper. And I'm tearing the fabric for that rough edge that I love so much, and I switched to the darker thread for this one, so the stitching will definitely show up. And for this lovely page, I'm using a washi tape, a nice thick washi tape, to create a spine basically. And I appreciate all of you junk journalers out there. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Thanks. Bye.